The Los Angeles skyline glimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Grand Plaza penthouse, a view I owned along with the hotel beneath my feet. To the world, and more importantly, to my family, I was Patricia Sullivan, a perpetually scrambling hotel consultant. They had no idea that their beloved Henderson Hotels was a crumbling relic, a single, dusty tile in the sprawling mosaic of my global empire. My executive assistant, Dylan, entered without a sound, a stack of digital reports materializing in his hands. "The Pacific Rim acquisition is finalized, Ms. Sullivan," he said. "We now hold a 73% stake in the luxury resort market across 6 Asian countries." I gave a slight nod, my fingers gliding over the tablet in my hand. The data stream showed the usual robust performance of my holdings. And then there was the other graph. Henderson Hotels. A steady, embarrassing decline. "Their numbers continue to drop," I observed, my voice flat. "Inevitably," Dylan replied. "Their operating model is a tribute to the last century. It's repelling the very clientele they claim to serve. Your parents' refusal to evolve is their most effective competitor." A dry, humorless smile touched my lips. The memory was as crisp as the financial charts before me. 3 years ago, in the oak-paneled office of Henderson's flagship, I'd laid out a blueprint for the future. I proposed integrated artificial intelligence systems, a commitment to sustainable luxury, and a hyper-personalized guest experience. My father hadn't even looked up from his desk. "This is a family business, Patricia. We don't need expensive toys from someone who's never been in the trenches." My mother's dismissal was softer, sharper. "Darling, you have your little consulting projects. Leave the real hospitality work to people who've built something." Those little projects and expensive toys now formed the backbone of the Salvin Group, the most formidable and discreet luxury hotel consortium on the planet. Their real business was slowly circling the drain. "Dylan," I said, turning from the cityscape. "Pull up the latest external metrics for Henderson. Guest satisfaction." The air before me shimmered, a holographic display igniting to paint the room in cold, hard light. A satisfaction graph appeared, its line not just falling, but in freefall. "A 40% decline this quarter," Dylan noted. "The Beverly Hills property is the primary culprit. Our internal audit report is damning." He handed me another tablet. I scrolled through the evidence. Grainy security stills of frayed upholstery, a concierge desk empty during peak hours, a dated bathroom fixture. Each image was a testament to willful neglect. Each one also justified the silent, secret accumulation of Henderson shares through a dozen shell corporations I controlled. We hovered at 48% ownership. "So close." "Your father called," Dylan said, his tone carefully neutral. He inquired, again, about your attendance at their annual awards gala next week. "The agenda indicates they are presenting your brother, Scott, with the Innovation in Hospitality Award." A short, incredulous laugh escaped me. Scott, whose crowning professional achievement was swapping out the brand of cashews in the minibar. He was to be celebrated for innovation while the very strategies I'd offered were generating billions for my shadow empire. I walked to the window, the sprawling city a chessboard beneath me. Every light a potential asset, every move calculated. "Confirm my attendance," I said, the words final and clear. The charade had lasted long enough. It was time to flip the board. "All preparations are complete," Dylan stated, his voice a low hum of certainty in my ear. "The final tranche of shares will be acquired at 2100 hours precisely during the awards presentation. Legal is poised. The press release queue is loaded." As if on cue, my phone buzzed on the marble console. A text from Mother glowed on the screen. "Patricia, do remember to dress suitably tonight. This is a black tie affair, not one of your casual consultancies." I glanced at my reflection in the panoramic window. My attire, a bespoke Chanel tuxedo jacket over a silk column dress, accessorized with Louis Vuitton heels that likely cost more than a year in my parents' prestigious presidential suite, was more than suitable. It was armor. "Reply," I told Dylan, a smirk playing on my lips. "Tell her I'll endeavor to meet the dress code." The preceding week had been a symphony of precision. Every logistical note, from the transfer of funds to the pre-written commands for our tech teams, was composed and rehearsed. As my town car glided to a halt under the aging portico of the Henderson Grand, the dashboard display flashed a final, beautiful number: 49.9% ownership. The front desk manager, a man whose name I'd known was on a list for replacement, scurried over, his smile strained. "Miss Sullivan, your parents, they asked that you join them through the conservatory entrance." I didn't break stride, my heels clicking a confident rhythm on the tired marble. "That won't be necessary," I said, my smile benign and utterly dismissive. I swept past him, through a lobby I had already mentally gutted and redesigned. "I believe the main ballroom is the correct venue." The air inside was thick with the scent of overpriced, but mediocre perfume and self-congratulation. The room glittered with the so-called elite of the hospitality industry. I recognized faces: developers from Dubai, management figures from Singapore, investors from London. Many, through layers of holding companies and silent partnerships, already reported to me. My family, in their blissful ignorance, had been hosting my own board meeting for years. "Patricia." The voice was a booming, familiar declaration. Scott materialized, chest puffed out in a tuxedo that fit just a little too tightly. "You actually came. Here to see how real legacy is honored." A waiter proffered a flute of champagne. I took it, the first sip confirming my suspicion, a domestic sparkling wine masquerading as prestige. Another symptom of the Henderson decline, soon to be remedied. "I wouldn't have missed it for the world," I replied, my eyes flicking to my discreet wrist-worn display. A notification pulsed: "Asset transfer, Phase 3 in progress. ETA, 2000 hours." In 20 minutes, the deed would be done. The stage, literal and figurative, was set. My parents held court by the bar, my father clapping arrival on the back, my mother air-kissing a socialite. They were monarchs of a sandcastle, oblivious to the tide I was about to command. I touched the nearly invisible comms piece in my ear. "Actors in position. Initiate final sequence." Dylan's calm reply was immediate. "All systems are live. The curtain rises on your mark." I let my gaze travel over the scene, the crystal glasses, the forced laughter, the proud, foolish faces of my family. A slow, cool smile spread across my face. "Well then," I murmured, more to myself than to Dylan, "let's give them a performance that deserves a standing ovation." The Henderson Grand Ballroom was a museum diorama of faded grandeur. Crystal chandeliers, dusty and missing droplets, hung like forgotten jewels. The gold leaf on the cornices was dull, the velvet on the drapes threadbare in the light. I saw not a celebrated venue, but a schematic. Every stained carpet and scuffed chair leg was already catalogued for the renovation plans waiting on my server. "Patricia, darling." My mother's voice was a practiced melody of condescension. She offered her cheek for a kiss that never made contact with skin. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, performed an instant audit of my appearance, lingering on the sapphire and diamond bracelet at my wrist, a piece from Cartier's high jewelry collection. "How unexpected to see you here. And wearing such substantial pieces." Her smile was a tight, painted line. "Your consulting practice must be more lucrative than we imagined." If she only knew the bracelet was a casual Tuesday choice, its value eclipsed by the monthly budget for the global IT infrastructure that truly ran my empire. "One manages," I said, my voice bland. "Ladies and gentlemen." My father's voice erupted from the podium, amplified and booming with paternal pride. "Welcome to the 35th annual celebration of Henderson Hotel's excellence." My attention drifted to the chronometer on my phone. 18 minutes. The transfer would finalize right as Scott reached the crescendo of his no doubt insipid speech. "Your brother," Mother whispered, leaning in with a confidential air as she gestured toward Scott, who was adjusting his cufflinks at a front-row table, "is a true visionary. Did he tell you? He boosted room service revenue by a remarkable 4% this quarter, all by selecting a more approachable font for the menus." I sipped my champagne, the acidic bite of a cost-cutting vintage sharp on my tongue. I remembered the 300% profit surge in my own Asia-Pacific region after deploying an AI that learned guest cravings before they did. I said nothing. Miss Sullivan. Dylan's calm voice was a whisper in my ear. The digital signatures are verified. The shares are yours. And a pertinent update, a full delegation from the Global 5-Star Advisory has just entered the room. I saw them immediately, 3 severe figures in impeccably tailored suits, their expressions unreadable. Perfect. My anonymous dossier, detailing the Hendersons' plumbing failures, security lapses, and vermin citations, had reached them exactly 7 days ago. And now my father's voice swelled with emotion, the moment that embodies our forward-looking spirit. The Innovation in Hospitality Award is presented to my son, Scott Henderson, for his pioneering dedication to guest service evolution. Scott ascended the steps to a smattering of polite applause. From the crowd, I caught the eye of a renowned Swiss hotelier, a man who secretly sat on my advisory board. He raised his glass to me, the ghost of a smirk behind the rim. Thank you, Scott beamed, gripping the podium. As we all know, innovation is the very lifeblood of Henderson Hotels. It's about honoring our timeless values while a soft, decisive vibration pulsed against my wrist. A single elegant word appeared on my screen, consummated. I owned 51%. My lips barely moved. Dylan. Initiate Protocol Alpha. As Scott opened his mouth to continue, the massive presentation screen behind him and every auxiliary monitor in the ballroom dissolved into static before plunging into darkness. A collective, confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Then, the screens flashed back to life, not with the Henderson crest, but with a stark, familiar login prompt. My login prompt. The gilded H of the Henderson logo fragmented into pixels and bled away. In its place, a ruthless cascade of data began to flow. Real-time guest satisfaction graphs plummeted like cliff faces. Quarterly revenue bars shrank in a humiliating reverse growth chart. Then came the inspection reports, health code violations, safety system failures, damning quotes from anonymous staff surveys. What in God's name is this? My father's bellow broke the stunned silence. He lunged for the podium as Scott stood paralyzed, his award suddenly a ridiculous prop in his hand. I rose from my seat. The acoustics of the room carried my voice, clear and measured, to every corner. Ladies and gentlemen, I propose we address the most pressing issue here tonight, the systemic failure of Henderson Hotels. Patricia, sit down. My mother's hiss was a viper's strike from the front row. Have you lost your mind? You are humiliating us. I began walking down the central aisle, my heels the only sound in the hushed room. On the contrary, I am simply halting the humiliation you've been inflicting on this company for years. With a flick of my hand, the screen shifted again. The data grew more specific, more brutal. A market share pie chart showed a 40% slice had simply vanished. A customer complaint log was a steep, red upward curve. 3 property names flashed with a pulsing, amber warning, 5-star status review pending. How dare you? My father's face was a mottled crimson. He jabbed a finger toward the security staff lingering by the doors. Remove her from the premises immediately. I would advise against that, I said. My tone cool. I gave a slight nod to Dylan, who, along with a few other strategically placed attendees, began distributing sleek black folios to key people in the audience. As the majority shareholder of Henderson Hotels, my presence is not only appropriate, it is mandatory. The silence that followed was absolute and heavy. The crash of my mother's champagne flute hitting the marble floor was explosive. She didn't even seem to notice the shards at her feet. Scott's jaw worked soundlessly, his expression a perfect mask of incomprehension. Majority shareholder? My father repeated the words as if they were in a foreign language. You really should have monitored your stock ledger more closely, I said, arriving at the foot of the stage. Sullivan Global Ventures has been a persistent buyer for the past 18 months. 3 minutes ago, our stake crossed the 51% threshold. One of the stone-faced members of the Global 5-Star Advisory stood, his eyes fixed on me. Sullivan Global, the parent entity of the Sullivan Group. The very same, I confirmed, allowing a small, formal smile. But that's the most disruptive force in luxury hospitality, he murmured, more to his colleagues than to me. My brother found his voice, though it was a choked squeak. That's impossible. You just give advice. I turned my gaze to him, letting the full weight of my contempt show. Actually, Scott, I give commands. I am the founder and CEO of the largest private luxury hotel consortium on the planet. While you were debating serif versus sans serif, I was acquiring it. I gestured to the screens, which now bloomed with a global map, dotted with hundreds of lights representing my holdings, a constellation compared to Henderson's few flickering candles. And tonight, I begin the salvage operation on the wreck you've made of our family's name. The ballroom exploded into chaos. A chorus of gasps and urgent whispers swelled into a din. Seasoned investors clawed at their phones. The five-star advisory delegates formed a tight, intense circle, passing my provided folios between them, their heads bowed in grim conference. My mother collapsed into her plush seat, a marionette with cut strings, her foundation beginning to streak with silent, disbelieving tears. You cannot do this. My father's voice was a frayed wire, sparking with a tremor of fear beneath the rage. This is our family's legacy. Was I clarified, the single-syllable final and cold as stone. It is now a subsidiary. And I assure you, my vision extends far beyond the aesthetics of room service menus. 1 week later, dawn poured liquid gold into the expansive office that had been my father's inner sanctum. The heavy oak desk was gone, replaced by a sweeping, minimalist slab of stone. The walls, once lined with stuffed fish and faded regatta photos, were now bare, awaiting new installations. The city stretched out below, a kingdom waking up. The tabloids, piled neatly on a side table, screamed their gleeful headlines, "Secret Hotel Tycoon Unmasked." And the consultant's coup, "Billions in Revenge." The integration team is on-site and operational, Dylan stated, placing a fresh stack of briefs on the desk. The press corps is assembled and growing restless in the grand conference room for your inaugural address as CEO. I didn't turn from the window, already visualizing the new silhouette of the skyline. The architectural renderings were approved. This building would soon gain 20 floors, a new crown. And my family? Your mother's calls average 1 every 73 minutes. Your father's legal challenge was dismissed yesterday. Our counsel had it invalidated before the judge finished his coffee. Regarding Scott, Dylan's voice carried a hint of dry amusement. He remains persistently, though unsuccessfully, attempting to access his former corner office. His keycard was deactivated at midnight following the acquisition. Speaking of security, I said, finally turning. My gaze fell on the tablet he offered. The full-spectrum audit of all Henderson properties is complete. The findings are precisely as you forecast: decade-old firewall systems, employee access protocols with more holes than lace, and physical security bypasses in a dozen locations. He paused, a deliberate beat. There is also the matter of the financial audit. The anomalies in the discretionary funds managed by the former head of innovation are quite creative. I scrolled through the data. Inflated vendor invoices, phantom consultancy fees, reimbursements for lavish client dinners that never happened. Scott hadn't just been incompetent, he'd been embezzling. It was a sordid, perfect leverage. Miss Sullivan. The intercom chimed with my assistant's polite, steady tone. Your parents and brother are in the reception area. They are insisting. I smoothed the lapel of my Versace blazer, the silk cool under my fingertips. A small, composed smile touched my lips. Show them in, please, I instructed. It's time for a lesson in modern corporate governance. The door did not so much open as suffer a breach. They swept in on a gust of outrage and mothballed perfume. My mother, a vision in a Chanel suit from a bygone era. My father, apoplectic, the veins on his temples pronounced. Scott shuffled in their wake, a ghost of entitlement, already looking diminished by the minimalist scale of my office. Who do you think you are, locking us out of our own building? My father's palms crashed onto the stone surface of my desk with a force that made the lamp tremble. This is still Henderson Hotel's property. A common misconception, I replied, my voice level. I tapped a single command on the discrete panel set into the desk. With a soft, hydraulic hum, 4 large screens descended silently from the ceiling, framing the room. Welcome to the temporary headquarters of Sullivan Global, Henderson Tower Division. The Henderson part, like that suit, is scheduled for retirement. The screens ignited, bathing their stunned faces in the cool light of blueprints, 3D renderings, and financial models. It was a complete autopsy and resurrection plan. Schematics for gut renovations of every flagship property, energy consumption graphs next to proposals for geothermal retrofits, profiles of new AI concierge systems, organizational charts with a staggering 70% of management roles marked for replacement. "You're dismantling a century of history," my mother breathed, her voice thin as she lowered herself into a chair, as if her legs could no longer support the weight of the visuals. "I am halting a century of decay." I slid a matte black folder across the desk toward her. "These are the unaudited reports from your final quarter. Guest satisfaction metrics have fallen off a cliff. Occupancy is languishing in the budgetary hotel range. And 3 of your properties," I tapped the relevant page open, "are one inspection away from having their stars publicly plucked." I let the pages speak for themselves. "You didn't build a legacy. You presided over a slow-motion demolition." "Those are internal documents," Scott blurted out, finding a shred of his old belligerence. "You have no right." "As the controlling shareholder, I have every right," I said, my smile sharpening. "To every server, every ledger, every line item. Especially the imaginative ones in your departmental budget, Scott." I found the invoices for the neurolinguistic menu optimization seminar in Monte Carlo particularly creative. "The board's audit committee will be fascinated." Scott's face turned the color of parchment. My mother's hand flew to her necklace, her knuckles whitening around the pearls. My father drew himself up, a last stand against the digital tide on the walls. "The board," he declared, a hollow echo of authority in his voice. "The board of directors will never ratify this vandalism." "No?" I asked, almost gently. I entered another command. The renderings vanished. In their place, a live mosaic of video feeds appeared, the grand lobbies of every Henderson hotel across the globe, from Tokyo to Paris to Dubai. The time zones meant some were bustling with morning checkouts, others quiet in the evening hush. "Watch closely," I instructed, my eyes fixed on the screens. "The board's opinion is about to become academic." On every screen, in a perfectly synchronized moment, time caught up with the Henderson legacy. From the bustling lobby in Singapore to the quiet grandeur of the London property, the ornate, scripted H wavered, pixelated, and evaporated. In its place, with sleek, silent finality, the new logo resolved, the interconnected, minimalist spheres of the Sullivan Global brand. It was a visual tide sweeping west, from dawn in Asia to midnight in New York, erasing their name in real time. "Impossible," my mother whispered, her eyes wide with a horror that was part shock, part financial calculation. "The capital required for a global rebrand, the physical signage alone." "You're fixating on the cost of the paint," I interrupted, opening a live financial dashboard on my desk console, "while ignoring the value of the canvas. This investment is a rounding error in our quarterly capital expenditure report. Would you prefer to see the canvas?" With a gesture, I replaced the global feeds with a torrent of data. Assets spanning 47 countries. Revenue streams that dwarfed the GDP of small nations. Market penetration graphs that shot upward like skyscrapers. Each metric was a monument built from the very concepts they'd dismissed over family dinners. "While you were dismissing my proposals as naive," I said, rising and circling the desk to stand before them, I was architecting the new luxury vernacular. Rooms equipped with biometric profiles that adjust lighting and temperature before a guest even swipes their key. Building management systems that have reduced our carbon footprint and our utility overhead by 82%. An employee academy whose graduates are now heads of department at your former competitors' flagships. I let the data on the screens underscore my words. Every fancy fad you laughed at is now an industry benchmark valued in the tens of billions. "The board convenes in 9 minutes, Ms. Sullivan," Dylan stated from the doorway, a silent sentinel. A full quorum is confirmed, with the observers from the Global Advisory in attendance. "Excellent," I said, the word crisp. The first order of business will be the vote to ratify the full operational and philosophical restructuring of the Henderson assets. A new charter. A new compass. You cannot simply delete us. My father's voice was a ragged thing, stripped of its old power. Our blood is in every brick. Your sentiment is in the bricks, I corrected, coldly precise. My capital and innovation will be in the foundation moving forward. I picked up 3 slim, identical folders from my desk. You do have a choice, however. You may remain as minority, non-voting shareholders. The terms are inside. I extended the folders. Sign, and you retain a symbolic piece of the past. Refuse, and I will initiate a mandatory buyout of your remaining shares at the current market valuation. I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Given the trajectory I just halted, I suspect the offer will be sobering. Scott snatched his folder, his eyes darting across the dense legal text. These are shackles. This is extortion. It's a shareholder agreement, Scott. The kind that prioritizes solvency and growth over ego and nepotism. The kind you never had to understand. I adjusted my cuff and turned toward the door. Shall we? The board is waiting, and I'm sure they're curious about the return on investment for your typographical revolution. The boardroom hour was a swift, surgical procedure. Presentations of data replaced speeches. Votes were cast electronically, the results appearing on screens in unambiguous green. Signatures were applied with digital stamps. By the time I stood before the bank of microphones in the press conference, the entity once known as Henderson Hotels had been legally, irrevocably, and peacefully dissected and reassembled as a subsidiary of Sullivan Global. The family's feeble objections were silenced not by my arguments, but by the forensic display of Scott's creative accounting, which had been distributed to every board member just moments before the vote. The press gallery was a storm of flashing lights and shouted questions. Amid the glare, I saw them, sequestered in a shadowed corner of the room. My father, his posture deflated, the bluster gone, leaving only a husk of confusion. My mother, mechanically dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, her gaze fixed on nothing. Scott, pale and vacant, watching the scaffolding of his imagined kingdom be torn down in real time. Miss Sullivan. Over here, a reporter barked. Was this takeover motivated by personal revenge? I let the question hang for a moment, my gaze traveling from the reporter to the 3 figures in the shadows. I remembered the dismissive pats on the head, the proposals filed away unread, the condescending praise for my little hobby. I prefer to see it as architectural preservation, I said, my voice calm and carrying. When a foundation is cracked, the only way to save the structure is to rebuild it from the ground up. Sometimes, honoring a legacy requires the courage to completely reimagine it. Later, in the serene quiet of my office, the city's electric tapestry glittered below. Dylan entered, placing the first editions of the International Business Dailies on the desk. The headlines were variations on a theme: The Phantom Tycoon, Consultant Reveals Hotel Colossus. The Henderson Heist, How a Daughter Outbuilt Her Dynasty. Your mother left this at the front security desk, he said, his tone neutral. He placed a single, cream-colored envelope on the stone. I opened it. The handwriting was my mother's, elegant but rushed, the ink slightly smudged. Patricia, we were wrong. All these years. So very wrong. Can we please talk? Mom. I read it once. Then, without a word, I slid the note into the top drawer of the desk. It disappeared into the darkness with a soft click. The sprawling architectural plans for the Henderson Tower renovation were spread before me, a map of a future I would control down to the last detail. That other, messier draft of personal history would have to wait its turn. Dylan, I said, my eyes not leaving the blueprints. Yes, Miss Sullivan? Convene the global regional presidents via hologram tomorrow at 7 a.m. sharp. And have the residence team prepare the clifftop presidential villa at the Sullivan property. I'll be there next week to review the Pacific expansion. There was a brief pause. A family reconciliation trip, he ventured, his caution audible. I finally looked up, not at him, but at the constellation of lights that represented my holdings across the globe. My smile was slight, composed, and contained no answer at all. Just business, Dylan, I said, turning back to my plans. It's always just business.